I'm Emmett, and I like to make stuff. Haha. But sometimes I don't know what to make. So I devised a game that allows me to randomly select characteristics from these little alchemy jars that will inform me of the character that I am to create. I normally play this random character creation challenge with my brother, Wyatt, but sometimes he's too busy and I get antsy and I just want to make something anyway. So today I'm gonna be working on my own. You gonna stay? Where do you want to go? So normally I would show you the process of drawing the character traits from each of the categories from those jars as I just presented. But the thing is, when I filmed that, I was still recovering from my concussion and had a very loopy brain, and I just fumbled my whole way through it. So instead of playing that or trying to recreate it, I am instead going to do my best announcer voice and read just from the sheet that I came up with. For the silhouette, we have man, which is human, but you know, I have man, monster, machine. I like the sound of that, but human is the important thing. For human accessories, we have a hat. For the limb count, I came up with 5. The genre is sci-fi. The gender is female. The age is adult. The physique is lean/fit. The presentation is nice/simple. For armor, we have light armor, which is cloth-based armor. The damage is none. New, shiny, you know, undamaged. For a weapon, we have a gun and an axe. And the color scheme is yellow and blue. I almost forgot about the light armor, actually. I basically just put her in clothing. But, I mean, it's sci-fi clothing. Well, little spoiler warning, I suppose. But yeah, the first thing that hit me was the 5 limbs. That's one of those categories, like if it was just me manipulating things to the way I would want them, I would probably, when I'm dealing with human characters, I would just stick to the basic 4 limbs. But I had a little Wyatt in my head saying, that's how the game is played. It's the randomization. I don't get to control that. So I stuck with it, even though I was trying to figure out like 5 limbs. How do I make a person with 5 limbs?
I still think that man is going to evolve into woman, not a dragon monster with 3 legs.
3 legs?
The human silhouette could technically just be humanoid, so I could have gone with like an alien with a prehensile tail or something, but I didn't think of that. Like I said, I was still dealing with a concussion when I started this, so I just collapsed and fell asleep immediately after drawing the categories, and I actually woke up with like the perfect idea. It was just boom, aha, I know what I'm gonna do. And specifically, I got in my head the phrase parasitic artillery. I realized I could combine the gun with the 5th limb and make a robotic attachment akin to like Doc Ock arms or Doris the Helping Hat. You know, something that starts out somewhat unassuming and then starts to take over its host and enforce its own will later on. Because every major war has some kind of technological advancement that we only think about the ethics of after the fact. Like Germans using poison gas all throughout World War I. Wasn't until afterwards that we decided that was a war crime. We're still debating the ethics of atomic bombs to this day. So what if, in some sort of futuristic war, we get guns that are strapped to the backs of soldiers. Those soldiers are sent out to war, they get shot, the gun can detach, walk across the battlefield, and find a new victim. Though I guess that raises the question of if you have a mobile robotic gun, why don't you just unleash those on the battlefield? Why attach them to soldiers? I tried to come up with some kind of BS excuse. I figured that plasma, as in a plasma weapon, was not the same type of plasma as in your blood. But I was really hoping that I could make that connection and say that, like, the gun uses plasma and so it needs a human host to kind of drain like a battery in order to fuel its weapon. So that's basically my headcanon. I just don't know. I don't know what the pseudoscience behind that would be. It's just, that's the way I imagine this working. The human host is like the ammo pack. And so that idea gave me the image of like an unsuspecting victim fighting back. And so I was thinking of having the axe not be like a sci-fi futuristic axe. It's just kind of a regular axe lying around that like you're desperately trying to like chop the thing off. The problem is though, that's a little bit dark. This is not supposed to be dark or creepy. This is supposed to be nice, shiny, friendly even. And I really wrestled with how to combine those ideas until I realized going with the military approach, I could do a propaganda poster. And then I decided I just wanted to go ahead and do a figure and a picture. Because normally, when I'm doing this with Wyatt, I'll make a figure, he'll make a picture. But since I started doing more drawing and stuff like that, I have that debate in my head of like, okay, do I want to stick with that or do I want to draw stuff? I just decided to have my cake and eat it too and draw a picture and make a figure. Because I did so much concept artwork for this. Normally I have like 3 pages. This is like, well, I guess some of these are duplicates, but like I have the basic sketches that I was kind of working on. I started coloring some of them in, trying to figure that out. Oh yeah, because the color scheme was kind of hard to nail down, because with the propaganda poster and the red and blue color scheme, I almost just drew it as a vault suit. I really had to dial back the Fallout elements because retrofuturistic is its own category in this game. This is sci-fi, this is futuristic. I didn't want it to feel retro. It does have a little bit of retro vibes just because of the nature of kind of the aesthetic I was going for with that type of propaganda poster, but I didn't want it to look Fallout. Hopefully I succeeded. But yeah, I did a lot of different colorings for these concept art pieces, and then I even went to the computer and did even more. There was always a certain look that I kept going back to, and I kept using other colors in there as well as the yellow and the blue. Like a lot of it ended up being green because that's kind of the military look that I was going for with the robot. Because that's how I interpreted the hat. The hat is supposed to be like a sort of military helmet. And because the helmet is actually a part of the robot too, and I wanted the visor, like, thinking of like the helping hat kind of, I was imagining when it's in the nice propaganda mode, the visor's up. And I was wanting it to be like on tracks so that the tracks were kind of sticking down almost like a spider face, like there were fangs. Those tracks are there because the visor can then like slide down and lock into place over the face when it's actually like mind controlling you. So for the actual artwork that I ended up doing, once I knew the design I was going for, I used the 3D model posing tool on clip paint to get the pose that I wanted, and I kind of did a basic outline of the robot itself, which ended up looking like this. And then I actually took this, I taped it up to a window and traced this by hand, which gave me this. I sketched over it and then inked it with a pen and erased the lines and then scanned it and copied it. I did one with marker and one with watercolor. I think if I just had to choose between these two, I like the watercolor one better, even though it looks a little messier because of the smudging and everything. But that's why I scanned both these into the computer, kind of overlaid them and combined them so that I could have the best of both worlds. I just kind of smoothed up a lot of the colors and cut it out onto a PNG so that I could make sure all the lines were clean and stuff like that, and that way I could mess with the background and get different kind of poster designs. This is the one that I ended up with that I liked the most. When I knew I wanted to make it more of a presentation, not just a character, I wanted there to be a platform for her to go on. I wanted to really set the scene. I made kind of this design with more of the blue. This is supposed to be like the hologram version. I'm sad this didn't work, but I tried printing that onto wax paper, and I guess now that it's dried, it's a little better, but it was like, it's hard to see for one thing, and then when it first printed out, it was wet, it was smudgy, it was not sticking at all. But yeah, I was hoping that this would be a little clearer and that I could like stand this as like a hologram being projected above the scene, but instead I just went with kind of the poster. Well, you'll see what it looks like.
Made the character out of pipe cleaners, as I always do. Made the bones out of pipe cleaners. Wrapped it in tape. Covered that tape in foam. Just kind of building out the basic musculature. I'm just going to go ahead and say it, but I still have trouble with shaping the breasts correctly. And how like it flows from the chest into the bust. I just need more practice. You know, shaped all that with clay. Got the better design go. But I had to grind a lot of it down with a Dremel just to try and, you know, like get like the sternum flattened out, because originally the whole thing was too kind of puffed out. Shaping the face is always a little tricky. I keep trying to go more and more natural with faces and hopefully more realistic, but sometimes it almost taps into the uncanny valley where some days I just want to go back to my cylinder heads. But, you know, some projects I'm like, I have a specific idea, I have a specific character, I want a more realistic looking face. I ended up using a lot of Lego parts for the guns. Not as much as I thought it was, because originally I was thinking it was just going to be a regular gun. I don't think I had the design figured out at this point. So I was thinking I'd use a lot of Lego parts for the actual gun itself, and I mostly used it for the part that needs to slide in and out. As you can see, I like cut apart a tire and glued it to one of those little gray bits, and then had a piece between it so it can slide back and forth. Then used that tire as kind of the basis for where all the pipe cleaners would attach to. But yeah, the grabber arms were made with cardboard. A lot of the actual armor bits were made of foam, and with that top part, I kind of structured it with foam and then covered it in clay. Same thing as I did with like some of the bodily features on the character, just to sculpt things a little more organically. I tried to make the clothes very realistic. Originally, I was actually gonna like have the kind of, what would you call it, like a bodice piece just be attached to like her midriff so that it would kind of move around and shift naturally, but there were some wardrobe malfunctions with that system, so I ended up gluing everything in place. So she doesn't have as much flexibility as she once did. Some of the armor on the pants was kind of inspired by like the Arkham Catwoman, how like it looks like a skin tight outfit, but it has padding on it, so you can kind of believe it as like cloth armor. It took a long time for me to figure out the arms on the robot and how exactly they were going to fold up onto her back. I was very afraid that I wasn't going to have enough room for all of them. And for the hair, I just like, I had some yellow fabric, and I just took a pink marker, like a Sharpie, and colored the ends of it, and then soaked it in water with a little bit of bleach. I did it once and it worked perfectly. And then I ran out of that fabric scrap, and so I kept trying to do it again, but it kept messing up. I forget how I eventually got it to work. I think maybe I stopped using bleach, even though I used bleach the first time and it was fine. But then I think I just went with water just to help, what's the word? Blend, fade. I don't know. I feel like I had a better word. Transition, maybe, from the pink to the yellow cloth. And then for the base, I had a whipped topping lid, and I just filled that lid with clay and let that dry, and that's the base of it. And then I carved a piece of foam to look like brick. Glued that on there, and then put a lot of fresh clay down around it. And then kind of smushed the debris into that fresh clay so that it looks like it's kind of muddy and falling to pieces. And I kind of tried to scrape, like I took my fingers, kind of pushed the clay around to look like she's been like planting her feet and kind of scraping the mud. And then while the clay was still soft, I sprinkled some sand on it just to give it some texture. And then let all that dry, and then covered it in Mod Podge and painted it. I tried to use very mundane colors. Like originally I was going to go with kind of like a red brick, but then I thought that would be a little too distracting because the focus is supposed to be on the character, not on the base. So I tried to use like a very muted brown for the dirt and just a simple gray wall for the brick, stuff like that. That way the character would pop.
So this is what I ended up with. This is the robot. And the robot, it's a little tricky. I have these like little fins on the nozzle that kind of lock the grabbers in place, but you can pop that out, spread the grabbers out, then kind of push that back in so it's out of the way. And there's little arms. So this was very Doc Ock inspired. Those little grabbers for latching onto the back. I ran out of hook and eyes. Well, I had plenty of eyes, but I didn't have very many hooks. But I think it actually worked better just to bend pipe cleaners to make hooks myself, because it's a little more discreet that way. I can kind of hide it within the figure itself. So there's hooks on her that it can grab onto, and the legs fold up very nicely, very compactly to be kind of a backpack. Then it snaps and the helmet goes on her head. And that is the Gunbot Girl. Sometimes I come up with a better name as I go along, but I always have like the initial name of like, what is it that I'm making? When I have my idea and I make a file on the computer for the previous character, when I knew that it's just kind of inspired by Carol from The Walking Dead, but not actually Carol, so I just called the file not Carol. This one I called the file Gunbot is your friend. So I've just been calling her Gunbot Girl. I'm actually really happy with how that turned out. The only areas that I'm not satisfied with is there are some areas where like the way the pipe cleaners are held together, it feels a little flimsy once I have it all together, and I'm worried if I mess with it and try to pose it too much, the pipe cleaners might snap, especially in this arm. But I'm not expecting to play with it that much, so it should be good, at least for a while. And the axe was kind of an afterthought, but I just needed a simple axe, so I literally just had a piece of foam that I stuck a handle through. Actually, I sanded down the handle to shape, which is probably the longest part of that process. But you know, it's obviously an axe, so. I think that worked out pretty well. Thank you for watching today's random character creation challenge. Hope you liked it, and have a nice day. Haha!